I finally got the chance to go to Torrington.
Yay.
And see the world famous Gopher Hole Museum. Tell people who have never been to this wonderful, quirky little museum how it got started.
Sure. So we moved to Torrington when I was in grade 1, and at that time the town was vastly different than what you see today. There were all kinds of businesses, stores, restaurants, an arcade, pool hall, comic book store. It was a really wonderful little place to grow up, and yet it was still very small. So as a kid, you could take off and do all these wonderful things and find adventures, but there was always somebody's grandmother watching you to make sure you weren't getting into so much trouble. And the reason that it was so busy is because of agriculture. So for a town the size of Torrington, it's always been between 250 and 350. To have one grain elevator is astronomical. But Torrington at one time had 5. That is completely unheard of. There are cities and towns that are 10, 20, 50 times larger than Torrington that didn't have 5, but we had 5 at one time. But predominantly through my time, they had 4. So with that, trucks and trains and people were constantly in the community and to take their grain to market, and there were businesses there to service them. So they would come into town, they're selling their grain, there's people there selling fertilizer, there's people there buying grain, they're going to the bank, going to the stores, going to the restaurants. And it was busy. It was a busy little place. In the early 1990s, however, the CPR decommissioned the railway lines. When the lines went up, the grain elevators went down. They moved to larger centers that still had rail, and the shutting down of Torrington began. Now, that's not unique to us. That happens straight across the country. So all of a sudden, there were tons of little towns that were something that suddenly were nothing. We just dealt with it slightly differently. So the museum started just a bunch of local people getting together, trying to save what was left of the rapidly dying town. They had 3 meetings. They got together, threw out ideas, and nothing really stuck. At the end of the 3rd meeting, they were feeling pretty frustrated and ready to give up when one lady, and honestly, she was just being cheeky, and she said, well, why don't we stuff gophers? We have enough of them. Everybody laughed. And then they stopped laughing, and that's exactly what they did. So this really is a labor of love of the entire community at the time. 5 people learned how to taxidermy, others made costumes, others painted dioramas, others built the museum itself. So yeah, I like to consider it a love letter or a time capsule to a time and place that probably is never coming back for Torrington.
Sorry. You find those unique little niches that mean something to you and then market it like crazy to the rest of the world.
Yeah, well, and for their part, they didn't actually have much to do in marketing. So this museum, just the idea of it, became a little TV blop, a fluff piece on a news program in Calgary. So it was just sandwiched between regular news segments. And that little thing took off around the globe. And this is before internet. So that was a really, really big deal. It caught the attention of PETA. PETA started a letter writing campaign protesting it because in their heads, they thought that gophers, which technically they're Richardson ground squirrels. Gopher is a colloquialism. A lot of people have something they call a gopher that is not indeed a gopher in our case, but ours is a Richardson ground squirrel predominantly, and they are far from endangered. They cost millions and millions and millions of dollars of damage, not only to agriculture, but to the food supply system. They also do some good things, like everything else in nature. There's yin and yang. So we do appreciate them. And we're also taking advantage that we have many in rural Alberta, in rural Saskatchewan, rural prairies, period. But yeah, the museum itself was meant to be a 5-year project to help those local businesses. Almost none of those businesses still remain, but the museum is now entering, next year will be its 30th year open.
And that in itself is unique and amazing. The longevity of something that started out as kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of figuring out your new place in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I was there, you had a lovely young woman working the counter, and she showed me the map.
Mm-hmm.
How many countries have actually had people visit your museum?
Every single country in the world has visited our museum.
Isn't that just
Yeah,
phenomenal?
it really is. I don't know what it is about this place that has captured the hearts and imaginations of so many people, but we are truly honored that people take time to come in the middle of nowhere to come and see us. It really is special.
Well, and for anybody who hasn't been to Torrington, the museum is not large.
No.
However, if you really take the time to read each and every diorama that's in there, you can comfortably spend 45 minutes to an hour just reading and giggling.
Yeah, we actually, most people spend about half an hour, but we have some people that spend over 2 hours. Each one of these dioramas tells a story in itself. So they all have they're beautifully painted, and they have a lot of detail within them, lots of hidden little Easter eggs that for those that are careful enough to look for them, they'll get a big hoot out of.
And it's the whole history basically of Torrington told by gophers, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea is you walk in, it is a darkly lit room with the dioramas lighting up. So the whole concept is you are a voyeur or a peeping Tom walking through a gopher tunnel and looking into the secret lives of gophers that just happen to be mimicking the history of the people above. Mm-hmm.